Fellas, since this weekend Sean O'Malley is going to be defending his belt against Merab, I thought I'd go through the top 10 of the Bantamweight division and rank all of them or rate them out of 10 by how big of a threat they would be to Sean O'Malley. So obviously 10 being there would be the biggest possible threat to Sean O'Malley, and I just don't see a way that Sean wins. And then 1 obviously being, it's just an easy fight for Sean O'Malley, doesn't really need worth mentioning to be fair. So which Bantamweight would be the biggest threat to Sean O'Malley, rating all of them in the Bantamweight division. And since he's going to be fighting him this weekend, I thought we'd just start with Merab, get him out the way. And the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to be going through the threats first, to what threats he has to Sean O'Malley, then the weaknesses that he could potentially show in that fight, and then the overall rating at the end. So the biggest threats that Merab has to Sean O'Malley, obviously, is the heavy wrestling style. It's a wrestler versus a striker matchup, and he has got really good heavy wrestling. I know I've mentioned this a lot recently in my prediction videos, but he has got some of the best wrestling right now in the Bantamweight division. I keep bringing that fight up with Petr Yan. It was so relentless, just takedown after takedown, and that was to Petr Yan, one of the better wrestlers in the I know he's a boxer predominantly, but still one of the better wrestlers in the division, and he was just dominating Petr Yan with the wrestling, making him look like a complete amateur. The same Petr Yan that at times was out grappling Sean O'Malley as well. That was what Merab was doing to Petr Yan, and in his last fight against Henry Cejudo, someone as high caliber as Henry Cejudo, when he was out wrestling him with ease, and his takedown offense in that fight was on point as well. And he seems in his last 2 fights to have massively improved his wrestling. Now I will say the fight with Jose Aldo was quite questionable, considering he really did struggle to take Aldo down. Aldo's takedown defense in that fight was amazing, and Merab couldn't really seem to get going, but in his last 2 performances against Petr Yan and Henry Cejudo specifically, he's shown that he has a really heavy wrestling style that's obviously going to be really dangerous for Sean O'Malley. He's not facing another striker. It's not even just an Aljamain Sterling where he takes his time. It's Merab. The dude is just going to shoot 400,000 takedowns no matter what every single round. And then the next biggest threat is obviously his crazy stamina as well. Call him a decision machine. Say, he can't get a finish. Call him whatever you want. But the fact is, the dude is just so high output and he's just so relentless. Like I said, it's just takedown after takedown. If he doesn't get the takedown, it's not gonna bother him. He's just gonna go straight again for another takedown. He ain't gonna stop from round 1 to round 5. He's just gonna keep on going, and he has some of the most crazy stamina, not only in the bantamweight division but in the UFC. So if he's just gonna be a nightmare to deal with, just all the time, takedown after takedown, high output, doesn't give you any time to breathe, doesn't give you any time to rest, and those are the biggest threats that Merab definitely has to Sean O'Malley. But there are definitely some weaknesses, and the main weakness is obviously his stand-up. He's a really good grappler, but his stand-up is definitely lacking. I mean, he nearly got finished in that fight with Marias. A couple more seconds and Marias would have been able to finish Merab in that fight when he got clocked by Big Shot. And even in his last fight, he got wobbled by Henry Cejudo. I'm not going to say he got completely rocked and he was out of it, but even a guy like Henry Cejudo was able to catch him. Imagine what the greatest striker right now in the bantamweight division in Sean O'Malley would be able to do if he timed the perfect shot. And that's why I predicted Sean O'Malley to win, because he just needs that one good shot to beat Merab. So he's a heavy wrestler. He's got crazy stamina, but he does lack the stand-up. Maybe it's improved for this fight, but he hasn't looked amazing on the feet in any of his other fights. So I'm going to give Merab an 8 out of 10. He's definitely one of the biggest threats right now in the bantamweight division. I do think he needs a little bit. I think he could definitely mix it up better with his stand-up, in my opinion, to get maybe to a 9 spot. And his stand-up is kind of lacking, but because of how, just relentless he is as a grappler, I'm going to give Merab an 8 out of 10. He's definitely got a good opportunity of winning this fight with Sean O'Malley. It is fairly close. I'd say it's like a 50-50, 60-40 type fight in favour of O'Malley, but it's still a very close fight, and I would not be surprised if Merab gets it done. So I'm going to give Merab an 8 out of 10. The next fight we've got is Jose Aldo. I think he's ranked number 9th right now in the bantamweight division, maybe 10th. But yeah, Jose Aldo recently came back, beat Jonathan Martinez. Now, the biggest threats that Jose Aldo has to Sean O'Malley is first and foremost the experience. This dude is experienced. I mean, the dude has been in the UFC and around the division. I mean, even back when he was in WEC for the longest time. He's a former champion. Some would say he's the greatest featherweight of all time. This dude has been around for so long. He's fought so many different styles. Sean O'Malley's brand new to the bantamweight division. Only won his belt 2 fights ago. Jose Aldo's been there, done that years ago. He's fought so many different styles. He's fought everyone you can possibly think of, and that experience is definitely going to be beneficial to Jose Aldo. And we kind of saw that in his last fight where he beat Jonathan Martinez, an up-and-comer, who is very talented but just weren't able to get past Aldo because of the experience. And the second threat is he's just so well-rounded. Jose Aldo, I know he's, you can say he's past his prime, but he's always been one of the best strikers in the UFC. He's always been one of the best strikers in the featherweight and the bantamweight division. He's just so good with his leg kicks, his timing as well, the ability to set shots up. And even in his last fight, displayed really good wrestling, which was unexpected, against Jonathan Martinez, and his boxing seemed to have been much better when he actually came back to the bantamweight division against Jonathan Martinez. And I think because he's so well-rounded and he has multiple options to take the fight, mixed with his experience, he's a very difficult fight for Sean O'Malley. But elephant in the room with weaknesses, he is out of his prime. This isn't prime Jose Aldo. This isn't the Aldo that was lapping the featherweight division. He is out of his prime. Like I said, you look at his fights, he has lost quite of his... Well, I know a lot of them were in the bantamweight division, but he has lost quite a few of his fights since 2019. He has been able to get on a bit of a streak, but he has been losing to these top guys like Max Holloway, Moraes, Petr Yan, Volkanovski, Merab. Like I said, these are all top guys, but if he's losing to those guys, what's to say he wouldn't lose to a guy like Sean O'Malley, who's also a top guy? So for Jose Aldo, very big threat for Sean O'Malley, very experienced, very well-rounded, but I would give him a 7 out of 10. I would probably favour Sean O'Malley to win this fight, but it's still a very difficult fight, especially with how he looked against Jonathan Martinez. He's a really good striker, is Jose Aldo, one of the best. Well, yeah, definitely up there with one of the best in the bantamweight division right now. He's also got the wrestling, he's got the experience. He's a difficult fight for anyone, so I would give him a 7 out of 10. And who knows, if he can get past Mario Bautista and then get another win, he's probably going to be fighting for a belt again, which is crazy. But again, he's got to go out there and do that first. So for Jose Aldo, I would give him a 7 out of 10. I'd definitely favour O'Malley on the feet as of right now, but he's still a big threat, and he's just not somebody you can really count out. Then we've got Rob Font. Rob Font's a bit of a weird one. He definitely has threats, but I'd say the biggest threat that Rob Font has right now is his boxing. He is a really good boxer. At one point, people were saying this dude has the best jab in the bantamweight division. The way that he knocked out Adrian Yanez a few years ago, and overall, just his overall boxing ability is really good. And he's always been a really good boxer. His hands have always been crisp, and I feel like that's kind of what you want when you're facing somebody like Sean O'Malley, to have a good boxing base. So he's definitely got the boxing threat, and he has the ability to shut people's lights out, like I said, as he showed against Adrian Yanez a couple of years ago. And the next big threat is the fact that he's just so tough. He's not an easy guy to put out. He's faced so many killers. He's faced so many monsters, and he's been able to survive. He's tough as nails, is Rob Font. He's not going to let a bad round or two take him. We'll take it out of him or get it, let him get finished. He's a very tough guy, and he's a very difficult guy to put out there. So for Rob Font, I'd say the biggest threats that he holds is his boxing and how tough he is. But the weaknesses is he's just got inferior striking. Like I said, he is a good striker, but he was getting outstruck by Marin Vera. Marin Vera was piecing him up in that fight, and we saw how O'Malley did Vera as well. And he was even getting outstruck by Davison Figueiredo. He's a really good boxer, he's Rob Font, and he is a top striker, but is he one of the best in the bantamweight division? I'm not sure. I think O'Malley would probably comfortably beat Rob Font on the feet and completely pick him apart. So the rating that I'm going to give Rob Font is surprisingly low, but it's a 4 out of 10. I just don't see him being a big threat to Sean O'Malley. I think O'Malley would completely piece up Rob Font, leave him looking bruised and bloody at the end of the fight like he did with Marin Vera. I think Rob Font would be able to last to the later rounds because of how tough he is, and he's got the decent boxing fundamentals, but when it comes to him and O'Malley, I just think O'Malley's levels above him on the feet, and I just don't see any other areas where Rob Font could potentially capitalise and beat Sean O'Malley. So he has got the boxing, but I just don't see him being a big threat. I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10. Good boxer, tough as nails, but it's going to take a little bit more to beat Sean O'Malley, in my opinion. It's not like he has this heavy grappling base to rely on as well. So I'm going to give Rob Font a 4 out of 10. Then we've got Soo Dong, another fairly dangerous striker in the bantamweight division. For Soo Dong, the biggest threat is that he is very heavy-handed. Soo Dong is one of the most powerful dudes right now in the bantamweight division. He just needs to land one good shot and it could be over. It could be lights out. He hits extremely hard. And similar to Rob Font, he has got really good boxing. And when he connects, it's definitely effective. People don't really want to engage in a fight with Soo Dong because of how powerful he is. And that could definitely be a threat to Sean O'Malley if he's able to clip Sean O'Malley with a good shot. What's to say that that doesn't potentially put Sean O'Malley's lights out? I know it's extremely unlikely, but if anyone's going to do it in the division, I would not count Soo Dong out. And the next big threat is that he has got a good chin. Similar to guys like Rob Font, he's tanked so many big shots. Even in that fight with Petr Yan, he's taken so many big shots from so many elite strikers in the bantamweight division, and he's just been able to walk forward and take it. So he's definitely got a really good chin of Soo Dong, which is what you want when you're facing somebody like Sean O'Malley who can put your lights out at any second. So heavy-handed, good chin, basically got all the fundamentals for a good brawl. But the weaknesses is, again, he's just not got the best defense. He has got a good chin, but his defense is definitely lacking. I feel like whenever, especially when people go to the body against Soo Dong, he's not the hardest to hit. I think Cory Sandhagen showed that a lot, and even guys like Chris Gutierrez and Petr Yan, he is quite a hittable dude, is Soo Dong. Not somebody that you want to overextend against and potentially get caught, but I don't think he's got the best defense, and I think it would be another guy where Sean O'Malley can kind of just land a lot of shots on like he did with Marin Vera. He's going to have to be cautious because of the power, and I don't think Sean O'Malley would just knock him out early on, but I definitely think, again, that Sean O'Malley would be the superior striker on the feet. So I'm going to give Soo Dong a 5 out of 10. He's got a small knockout threat that some other bantamweights don't have, and I think he would be able to last a few rounds, but I do think Sean O'Malley would probably cruise to a decision or get a finish in the later rounds, because I just see him being superior everywhere the fight goes. So I'm going to go with a 5 out of 10 being a threat for Soo Dong. Not really that big of a threat, but I think he's definitely more dangerous than the guys. Then we've got the first person who actually Sean O'Malley has faced before. Marin Vera. In fact, it was his last fight. Now, the threat that Marin Vera has is he has got an amazing chin. I mean, even if we go back to his last fight with Sean O'Malley, I still can't believe he survived that knee from Sean O'Malley. His chin is amazing. He's one of the toughest dudes in the bantamweight division. And it's not just the Sean O'Malley fight. So many big shots that Marin Vera's taken. And he doesn't even seem to be phased. He doesn't really seem to be wobbled. He doesn't get knocked out. And he's just got such a good chin. And talking of chin, his durability as well. I mean, the amount of times he's fought in the UFC and he's never been knocked out. He's never been put out of there. He always just walks forward and tanks so many big shots. He's pretty much impossible to put out. And even the last fight, like I said, I'm going to go back to the fight with Sean O'Malley. The fact that he was able to actually go the distance against Sean O'Malley is crazy as well. So he's very durable. He's got an amazing chin. He's never going to just go out. He's going to be there till the last round, looking at you, just like Rory McDonald looked at Robbie Lawler. He's a very tough guy, is Marin Vera. But the elephant in the room, the weakness is that he's already been demolished by Sean O'Malley. I mean, I don't really need to go into any specific weaknesses, apart from the fact that we've just seen him face Sean O'Malley, and he got completely battered. I mean, that should tell us everything we need to know. He got completely outclassed, outstruck in that fight. Wasn't even close, to be honest. Sean O'Malley just picked him apart, nearly finished him with the knee as well, but obviously, like I said, he's so durable and has got such a good chin that he survived. So Marin Vera, he's got a good chin, he's durable, but I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Again, I mean, he's got a slight threat, but based on what I saw in that fight with Sean O'Malley, it wasn't really competitive. Sean O'Malley just picked him apart like a punching bag, and I think if they were to ever fight again, it would be easier, or he'd just do the same again. So for Marin Vera, I can't really put him anything higher than a 5. And it's not even like he's been looking really good against other bantamweights. Even these other bantamweights like Figueiredo and Sandhagen have been able to find the number against Marin Vera on the feet. So I'm going to have to give Marin Vera a 5 out of 10. Then we've got Henry Cejudo, Triple C. Now, the threats that Cejudo has to Sean O'Malley is, first and foremost, he is a solid wrestler. He's a really good wrestler in the bantamweight division, and I think, again, if there's any style that's going to be unfavourable to Sean O'Malley, it's going to be somebody that can wrestle. And I know his wrestling has kind of fallen off in these past couple of years, but his more success in the UFC have been because of his wrestling and because of the wrestling background that he had before the UFC. And I think that's the first major threat, and the only way he can really beat Sean O'Malley, because he's not going to beat him on the feet. So the wrestling is definitely Henry Cejudo's best opportunity of winning, and he is a solid wrestler. And the next threat is, again, similar to Jose Aldo, the experience. He's been a champion in 2 different weight classes. He's fought some of the best. Dominic Cruz, Aljamain Sterling, Merab, Demetrius Johnson. He has fought some of the best in different divisions. He's been a double champ before. He's got that title experience in the UFC that Sean O'Malley doesn't. Well, Sean O'Malley does have title experience, but he's just had that experience that Sean O'Malley has never seen. He's faced a lot more styles and completely different fighters compared to Sean O'Malley. So I think the fact that he is a solid wrestler and he has that experience, he would have that over O'Malley. But the biggest weakness is just simply the fact that he hasn't looked good recently. He moved back up. I don't know why he retired in his prime, but in his last 2 fights, he didn't look good. He got beaten pretty comfortably by Aljamain Sterling, and I know this is a completely different style to Sean O'Malley, but he got pretty comfortably. And then even against Merab, toyed around by Merab. And again, I know Merab and Sean O'Malley different styles, but it isn't like he could necessarily get going on the feet apart from one good shot in the first round as well. So for Henry Cejudo, the rating I'm going to give him is a 6. Like I said, it isn't like he's come back and been destroyed by 2 strikers. He has faced 2 of the best grapplers in the division at the time in Aljamain Sterling and Merab. But I just can't say he beat Sean O'Malley. He hasn't looked good recently. He looks definitely out of prime. Doesn't look the best he's looked before. And even though he's a solid wrestler with experience, again, even though I think, you know, we can't really completely write him off, I think O'Malley would go through that fight and get a comfortable win over Henry Cejudo with the way that he's been looking recently. Then we've got Deiveson Figueiredo, one of the most underrated bantamweights at the minute. His move to the bantamweight division has been amazing. Now, the first big threat to Deiveson Figueiredo, or from Figueiredo, is that he is a threat from everywhere. I mean, undeniably, he's got really good jiu-jitsu. He carried from the flyweight division. His bread and butter is jiu-jitsu. It is grappling, taking people to the mat, keeping them there, and maybe finding a submission. We saw it earlier this year when he submitted Cody Garbrandt in the second round at UFC 300. He has got really good jiu-jitsu, and his striking is rarely slept on. He's a very powerful guy. He's Deiveson Figueiredo. He's never really had striking threat. Well, he's had striking threat, but he's never really been on the receiving end of a beating on the feet so far in his bantamweight division. And he's faced guys like Rob Font, like Marin Vera, and even dropped Marin Vera at one point as well. So he's a threat from everywhere. He could land a big shot on the feet. He could go for a double leg takedown. You never really go with Deiveson Figueiredo, and he does mix it up really well. And on top of that, he looks great in the bantamweight division. He's obviously a former flyweight champion, which obviously he's got the experience, and he moved up to the bantamweight division. I was quite skeptical at first, but so far, he's 3-0, and he's looked good in all of his fights. He looked really good against Rob Font. He finished Cody Garbrandt, and he had a really good win over the previous title challenger in Marin Vera. He's looked really good in the bantamweight division. There's sometimes when fighters will move to a different weight class and they'll kind of look off. Deiveson Figueiredo is not that fighter. He looks great in the bantamweight division. It's like his home. So those are the threats that he has to O'Malley, but the weaknesses, I'm not going to play into this too much, but I can't help but think that it just looks like they've got a massive size difference. Maybe this is more of a psychological effect because he comes from the flyweight division, but he's 5'5", and O'Malley's 5'11". Even though I'm sure Sean O'Malley's faced smaller guys like Petr Yan and stuff, I can't help but think if they were to ever fight, Sean O'Malley would just be like a sniper. His range would be so effective. The fact that the height difference is so big and they're two completely different sizes in the bantamweight division, I can't help but think that Sean O'Malley would find that sniper shot. The rating I'm going to give Deiveson Figueiredo is a 7 out of 10. He's a really, really tough fight for Sean O'Malley. And if he can get past Petr Yan, who I hope he faces next, he's going to be fighting for a belt. He's a former champion. He's a threat from everywhere. He looks great in the bantamweight division. It's hard to count out Deiveson Figueiredo. Would I favour Sean O'Malley in that fight? Yes, I would. But can you count out Deiveson Figueiredo with the guys that he's beaten and the way that he's looked in his career? You just can't. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Big threat, underrated bantamweight. But next we've got Cory Sandhagen. Always loses in number one contender fights. Kind of reminds me a bit of Curtis Blades in the sense that he always builds himself up then loses at the biggest hurdle. But no, Cory Sandhagen's one of the best in the division. The threats, he is a dangerous striker. He's not just another one of these Marlon Veras that walks forward and can tank a shot. He's a legit threat on the feet. He's got knockout potential. The way that he stance switches all the time, he's a big threat. He's faced some of the best strikers and looked good. He's an absolute killer on the feet, he's Cory Sandhagen. Definitely one of the best strikers right now in the bantamweight division, which is what you want when you're facing a guy equally as good on the feet in Sean O'Malley. But it's not just a striking. He's not just one of these one-dimensional bantamweights. He's a wrestling threat too. And I know he just got out-wrestled by Usman Magomedov, but come on. Usman Magomedov, you're comparing the Magomedov and O'Malley when it comes to wrestling. He out-wrestled Marlon Vera when they fought, surprised us with how good his wrestling was in that fight. He surprised us when he fought Rob Font and dominated Rob Font with wrestling as well. It's very evident that even though he might not look like it, Sandhagen's like kind of one of the best wrestlers in this division right now. Obviously, I'm not saying he's on the level of like a Magomedov or a Merab, but he's still a really good wrestler, and I think because of that, he can mix it up really well against Sean O'Malley. And similar to a guy like Figueiredo, he is a legit threat from everywhere. It's Cory Sandhagen. The weaknesses, he has been outclassed a few times. It's not like Cory Sandhagen is this surging contender like a Tom Aspinall in the heavyweight division. He has been outclassed a few times. He got outclassed when he fought Usman Magomedov in his last fight, despite it being close. He got outclassed when he faced Petr Yan. He got outclassed when he got put to sleep by Aljamain Sterling as well. And it kind of shows us that maybe Sandhagen, not that he's not got the capability to be a top fighter, but he has been outclassed by a lot of these top fighters before. And again, what's to say that Sean O'Malley can't do the same thing? So I'm going to give Cory Sandhagen an 8 out of 10. Definitely one of the biggest threats in the division right now to Sean O'Malley, and I still think if he was to face O'Malley, despite losing to Nurmagomedov and Yan and all these other guys, he would still be like, that would still be like a 50-50 fight, just because he's pretty much a stylistic nightmare for Sean O'Malley. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. He is tough as nails for Sean O'Malley, and if we ever do see that fight, I'm not going to say take my money, because obviously there's a couple of streams where we can watch the fight, but nah, I'll give him an 8 out of 10. He's tough as nails. He's a big threat to Sean O'Malley, and just to anyone in the division. Then we've got Petr Yan, another one who we've seen Sean O'Malley face before. Now, the threats that he has to O'Malley is because, well, again, he's well-rounded. Despite being one of the best strikers in this division, he's such a good boxer, finishing Jose Aldo on the feet. The way that he KO'd Uriah Faber, just in every single fight, he's almost always the superior striker. It's very, very rare that we're ever seeing Petr Yan being outstruck. He's just such a killer on the feet. His boxing, his overall kickboxing is so skilled, and he's a good wrestler as well. We saw in that fight with Soo Dong, he's wrestling. We saw it in the first fight with, well, the fight with Sean O'Malley, how good his wrestling is, and it showed that it was a big threat to Sean O'Malley. He is well-rounded, and he can mix it up really well, as we saw in that fight. And the second reason is, he has given Sean O'Malley his toughest fight so far. Out of all of O'Malley's fights in the bantamweight division, Petr Yan has definitely given him his toughest fight so far. I mean, in that fight, it was a very questionable decision, which kind of shows how tough he was. He really made O'Malley have to work when it came to the grappling side of things, and a lot of people were leaving that fight thinking that Petr Yan should have won that fight. He gave Sugar his toughest test, really roughened him up in that fight. But the weakness is, even though he gave him a tough fight, he still lost to Sugar. Like, Sugar was still able to beat him. O'Malley got the win at the end of the day. It was definitely a close fight, and since that fight, what's to say that O'Malley hasn't improved? I mean, his last 2 performances after that fight have been his best in the UFC, knocking out Sterling and dominating Marin Vera as well. I'm sure O'Malley's improved since that fight, and if he can beat him the first time, again, what's to say he can't do it again? So I'm going to give Petr Yan a 7 out of 10. I still think he's a really tough fight for Sean O'Malley, as we saw in that first fight. But to the extent of would he beat him, I don't know. I would still probably favour Sean O'Malley to win that fight these days. And similar to a Cory Sandhagen, I know these are completely different styles, but he has lost to some of these top guys like Merab and Aljamain Sterling, and obviously O'Malley himself. So I'd give him a 7 out of 10 for Petr Yan. Really tough fight for Sean O'Malley, but I'd still favour O'Malley to win. Then we've got Usman Magomedov. Probably going to be fighting for a belt after Merab. And he's just got so many threats. The main one being, he has got nightmare wrestling. We talk about guys like Petr Yan and maybe, you know, Cory Sandhagen having difficult wrestling. This dude is a nightmare. I'm going to go out and say it. He's the best wrestler right now in the Bantamweight division. I mean, look at that fight with Cory Sandhagen. We know how good Sandhagen is on the ground, and he just took him to deep waters. But not only the Sandhagen fight, the fight before that against Begsat, his entire UFC career. I mean, it's no surprise he comes from the Magomedov last name and he has wrestling, but this dude is just a wizard when it comes to grappling. His wrestling is so good. He's always able to take people down no matter what. Nobody can stop the takedowns and the wrestling from Usman Magomedov. He is a nightmare wrestler for Sean O'Malley. You've got Sean O'Malley struggling against Petr Yan with wrestling. Imagine what Usman Magomedov could do. If Sean O'Malley hasn't improved his takedown defense tenfold since that Petr Yan fight, he's in for a shock when he faces Nurmagomedov. But it's not just the wrestling, it's the fact that he mixes his boxing up really well. That's what really impresses me about Nurmagomedov. In that fight with Begsat, so many times he clocked Begsat with a big shot and then immediately just in with a takedown before Begsat could even calculate what happened. He mixes his boxing up really well, and he was at times outboxing Cory Sandhagen in that fight. The fact that he's got such a big takedown threat allows Nurmagomedov to get going on the feet, and he's a much better striker than, let's say, somebody like Merab. The weaknesses, we actually don't know the weaknesses that Usman Magomedov possesses against Sean O'Malley. We've got to see Sugar versus Nurmagomedov before we can even talk about weaknesses, because so far the dude's undefeated and he's looked good in all of his fights so far. It's hard to even mention weaknesses. So the rating I'm going to give him, I'm giving him a 9 out of 10, the highest rating so far on this list. I think Nurmagomedov is a nightmare matchup for Sean O'Malley, and if he was to ever face Sean O'Malley, which he probably will if O'Malley can get past Merab, I don't know if I'm picking O'Malley to win that fight. Nurmagomedov really impressed me in that Sandhagen fight. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. Absolute nightmare matchup, but that is what I think. Well, that's how I would rate all the bantamweights against Sean O'Malley. And which bantamweight would be the biggest threat to Sean O'Malley in your opinion? Let me know your thoughts, and just let me know your thoughts on this list overall. Thank you for watching.